Hello and welcome to this section. In this section, we will learn about the form container. This section mainly includes the following contents. First, we will talk about the working principle of the form container, then we will talk about its basic usage, and finally we will cooperate with a classroom exercise to deepen your use of our form container. First of all, let's talk about the working principle of the form container. The form container is mainly used to obtain the overall data, verify, and set the data entered into the UI widget under the form. Generally, it needs to be used together with the form field widget. Its working principle is roughly as follows, as shown in the figure. Generally speaking, we will first add our form container to the number of objects, and then add our various input controls under the form container, such as our input box, our drop-down menu, etc. Then, under these input controls, we will listen to our form fields. These form field components are similar to the plugin of input controls. Once they are added, they will be bound to a certain property in the input space in a two-way manner. Meanwhile, the form fields will serve as the connection point between the input control and the form content, and deliver the form content in the input control to us in real time. The form container can also pass the contents of our form container to our input control in reverse, which may sound a little abstract. Let's take a look at the basic usage of form widget. First of all, we will build a basic structure of our form, and then we will obtain and verify the information input by the user. So for our form widget, its biggest role is to obtain and verify the content input by the user. Then we can submit the content of the user book to our database and output the existing information from the database A display. Finally, let's update the existing data. Because of a series of database operations, including our submission database updating a series of data, we haven't learned yet. So in this course, we first learn how to build a static form and complete all the contents before data submission. Then, after we learn the database submission operation, we will submit our form information to our database. Then, let's open the editor and start the in-class exercise of this class. Before we start the class practice, let's take a look at what an application that we are going to complete in this class looks like. First, it has a title. The title here is our minimalist activity registration. Then I can enter our name and mobile phone here. We can see that in the logo here, we have turned his name and mobile phone into a required symbol by default. It's all here. I can enter a content casually, for example, a little black here, and then we can enter a mobile phone here. For example, we can enter a mobile phone casually, and then I can introduce myself here. When I click submit, we can see that the box of the mobile phone here becomes a red box, and we can see the school here. What does it mean that the test becomes false? It shows that the format is wrong. Here, we re-enter the mobile phone format, such as 1351112. We can see that it is correct. When we click submit, we can see that now such a format is completely correct, and he also clicks true to prove that our content is correct. Then we can expand and take a look at our name, Xiao Hei. The phone is our phone, and we don't write a self-introduction, which has become an object. Similarly, can we get this from our self-introduction when we write the corresponding self-introduction to our submission a series of values, and then this is a case that we will complete in this lesson. First of all, we will take down one of its basic UI, and then complete a production. So first, let's open our editor, enter our form container in the application name, and then click Create. In this way, we can complete the creation of a basic application. Then we add a page under the front end. Let's make a series of basic UI first. The first point is our minimalist activity registration, which is the text. Therefore, when we input the content, we can see that its overall layout is aligned in the middle. Therefore, here we change an alignment of the page to an area in the horizontal direction. The font here may be too large. We can adjust the font size a little smaller. And then the first line and the first line of it are names plus an input box, so we add a line widget, and then we add his name first, whether we add a name with a new number, so it is a new name, and then we add an input box on the right, and then we can add our input box to slightly adjust such a UI. For example, its name is too large. We change it to a number 16 character. If we think the color is too dark, we can slightly lighten the color a little, and then click a few to complete it. Then we can also modify the content of the same input box. If we want to modify its style, we can also modify it. Here we take a part of the industry A value is changed to a centered level, and it is also changed to a centered level. Then here, we change its height to a package. In this way, it completely includes our content. Let's clear the background color, so that we can make a basic style. Let's add a little more details to it. For example, for a name, we can first give it a default width. For example, here we give it a width of 80, and then let it align again. Similarly, the two sides are too urgent. We can also change a little bit of a left outer margin. We select such an input box and give it a left outer margin of about 12. It's not bad, that's right. We can see that the mobile phone and the content we introduced can actually be copied and pasted, so let's reuse it here. Copy the content of the industry here, paste it here, and then change it here to become a mobile phone. If the mobile phone is changed, please enter the content here, and then enter it here. We also changed the type into a mobile phone type. In the same way, please enter your name. Then, similarly, let's copy and paste it. Here, is our self-introduction. Then here, is a multi-line input box, so here, we open the multi-line number, and then its height must be more than 40. Here, we should visually check that there should be a 150 left for the right pixel. Let's change it to 150, and then change one of its contents to 1. Please enter your self-introduction, and then leave a little bit for him to lift up, down, left and right here. We can give him a 12. Since we are horizontally aligned here, we can't see such an effect, so here we need to change to an alignment method at the top of the vertical direction, so that we can do a good job in this series of input controls. Finally, we add a button to let him submit such data, so we add another button, it becomes a submission. The same background color is changed to be darker, and it is also very, very wide on this side. We can also change its width slightly to 200 pixels, and then change its fillet slightly lower for rounded corners. The rounded corners on this side are changed to 8 pixels, and the words are too large. Let's change the words a little smaller to become what? 18 pixels, and then it also needs to be a little away from the top, so we change one of his upper and outer screenwriters to 24 pixels. Similarly, if we don't want such a minimalist activity to be formulated, we can also give him a little upper and outer screenwriter. For example, give him a 48, move it down a little, and then put such a UI for reference, destroy it. Then here, I'll tell you some small details. For example, if we want a new number like the name to become a red style, how can I change it? Here's a small detail. For the high volume text here, we enter a new one, and then we select a red color for the highlighted text here, and then clear one of its highlighted backgrounds. You can also see whether its name will naturally turn into a red. Similarly, we can also operate in the following mobile phone. The color of the text is still set to red. The highlighted text is our signal, and it will automatically turn our signal into red, which is more conspicuous. Okay, so we have finished making the basic UI, and then we will use our form container. Through the introduction just now, we know that the form container, as a container, is used with a series of controls inside. Therefore, we add our form container at the bottom of the page. Where is the form container? We can see that under our circular creation container, there is not an icon like writing something. This is our form container. We can click to add our form container under the page. We can select our form to show that it has no property at all. Therefore, if we use the form container alone, it will not produce any effect. Therefore, in order to make our form container, we need to cooperate with the space in the form container, so we choose all our series of UI, we drag it under our form container, and then we need to input a series of UI to us how to add a check to the incoming control. You can notice that there are a series of number controls on our side, including such two, a name, a single line number box of a mobile phone, and a multi-line input box introduced by ourselves later. We first add an input check for a name like us, that is, our table. How can we add a single field? When we select such a space, we click a form field on the left and we click it. This is a bit like adding the motion of objects and their objects in the physical world in the canvas. This is a method of addition, which is equivalent to adding a field of such a form to such an input box. Then we will talk about the property of our form field. First of all, its first property is called our field name. The field name is a key name of the corresponding object when we get the form and set the form. What is the effect in practice? Just like a minimalist activity registration like ours, we can see its introduction here. There's an inside story. There's a phone. What's this? This is actually a name corresponding to its form field, so here our form name is written here. For example, if we add a name here, please enter a name. The corresponding field name is called a name, so here we enter a name, which is a name of its field, and then the property it binds. What does the binding property mean? The bound property refers to which property in the widget it is attached to. For example, now I add it under an input box. For our input box, how many attributes can you see that it has? Content, width, height, visibility, and opacity. Wait for this series of property. What property do I want to bind it to? I will select the corresponding property in the drop-down menu. Generally speaking, we will select the most likely property. For example, our input box is the most likely one. What you use is the input content, right? So we naturally help you choose a content for it. But if you don't want two-way binding, you can modify it here. For example, it only gets settings and so on. After we finish talking about the form widget, I will tell you a method of our binding. By default, it means that we have a two-way binding. Then, the next step is to select the type value of its field. In our drop-down menu, we give you a type with rich verification. The type of this field is convenient for us to verify. Here, let's demonstrate, for example, such a name. We change it to Chinese, so it will be verified. So far, if you don't check whether such a field is required or not, the final content is that it can be filled in or not, which will not affect our submitted content. Where will the submitted content be displayed? You can see whether we have true or false here. In fact, when we trigger through our form widget, it will verify such a content. If we set days here, and you have written any content here, when you click to fill in, it will not pass a verification. So, a field type and whether it is required are two contents. It is convenient for us to conduct a verification, so if our name is required, we will check such a required content here. Then, the default value is that if you need it to have the initial value of some months, you can fill in the default value here, so that we can complete the setting of a form field in the input box of input name. Similarly, we select our mobile phone, and we also set our form fields for it with the method just now. This is the same as adding. We first select the phone we please input, and then click to add a form field. Since its field name is a mobile phone, we will change it to a phone, and then what we want to bind. Is it also a content we input in the box, that is, the content it inputs, that is, the property bound here? There's no need to make another change. Then, the binding direction is followed. We default to two-way binding. Finally, let's talk about this content. What is its field type? We choose whether the field type is our mobile phone type, so here we choose a mobile phone type, and then whether it is required can see the asterisk, so whether it is required here can also be selected for me. In the same way, we are selecting an input box introduced by ourselves and adding a field of a form to it. Then, in such a form field, we add a field name and an instruction. Then, the content to be bound is also a content in our input box, and then the default two-way binding is not required. Use it. Then such a self-introduction, we actually don't have to limit him, right? Because people want to introduce in English and in Chinese, it is okay to introduce in English and in Chinese, and then it does not need to check whether a required property, so we have completed the first step. We add its form field to each such input control, which is equivalent to letting it have some property of such a form field. And then what? When we click submit, do we have to carry out a series of verification? So here we add his event for our click submit, and what do we do when he clicks back? We want the form information to be submitted, right? Therefore, we choose its subcontainer, and all its contents are integrated in our form container. Therefore, what content do we choose our form container to execute? It's called our getFormData. Therefore, in the process of obtaining, it will help us carry out a series of checks. Therefore, in the process of obtaining, it will integrate all the types of our form fields, and then check whether the values in it are legal or not. If it has illegal data, it will return our failure and trigger the verification failure event in the corresponding form field. Here, we don't care whether the verification fails or not. Here, we first make a debugging record through our application system. Here, we get its associated parameters from the drop-down menu. Here, we return whether the result is successful or not. In the same way, there is another associated parameter, that is, we return a form data of the result, and the form data means all the values in the whole form, which will unify us. So here, we directly preview to see the effect. On this side, we still turn on the check, and then we switch to console, and then we all have names and mobile phones first not out. We can directly click submit to see that it is called false, and then there is no value in it. I'll write it here casually. I also write one here, and then we submit it. We can see that it is still false, but we already have such values in our name and instruction, and then write the mobile phone. Write it casually. When we click submit, we can see that it is also an adverb. Why? Because there is a problem with our mobile phone type. Can we enter a correct mobile phone type and click submit to see that it has passed our verification, right? And you can get the following series of values. However, some students will find that this is a little different from our practice. Do you think when I click submit, if it is in a legal field, it will select our form? When we click submit here, if it does not meet the requirements, he is just here to prompt us that we are wrong. And we can also take a look through our drop-down menu. For example, we can print an illegal field of the returned result. Here we select such a form widget. We trigger it through event. The trigger event here will verify the success and our verification failure. So here, we put the value that failed to verify into it. What if it failed to verify? What do you want us to do with such an input box? Set the border color to red, so here we set the border color by setting the property method. So here we set the border color to such a red, there is a red one here, and then click it to finish. So if he fails to verify, he will set the border color to such a color. In the same way, we can copy and paste such an event again. If you want to verify the success, what does the successful verification mean? Explain whether it is restored to the original color, so we set the color of one of its forms to its default color. We see that the default color is CSS. So here, if it is normal, we set its color to such a color, so we add a verification situation for such a field where the insider is located. If it fails to verify, it will set a color for a field such as our name. If the verification is successful, the name field will be changed into an original color, so we can also set such an event for our mobile phone, or select our form field and click it. If the verification is successful, we can copy the event here. If the verification is successful, we can set a color of to see, and then change it here. Here is our mobile phone. Please enter the mobile phone. Let's copy it here. If the verification fails, copy it here and paste it here. If the verification fails, let's enter the input box of the mobile phone and set it to such a color. Here, let's take a look again. So here, it's called our name. Enter it casually, and then the mobile phone here will enter it casually. When I submit, I can see that because the characters of my mobile phone are illegal, so he frames our mobile phone. Let's enter it again, and then click a submit to see. Now it's legal, so there is nothing in our illegal field. Therefore, we should pay attention to the fact that for our form fields, no matter your field type, or whether it is required, these two need to be verified. So if you check whether it is required or not, if it is empty, it will tell you that the text is wrong. Of course, if its field type does not meet the type you write, it will also report an error. Of course, some students will ask that you only have Chinese cardinal number, even number, and so on. What if the type he writes is outside this? In fact, all types are included here. Why? As you can see, there is a content called customization. After customization, there will be more such content called our regular expression. In other words, if it doesn't satisfy such a regular expression, it can't pass the verification at all. So here, I'll show you that. For example, I won't change a mobile phone here. For example, the type of such a field is Chinese. If we don't provide Chinese, I'll choose our regular expression. How do I use the method of filling in recently? So here, let's learn about the use of regular expressions. Here, we just enter a regular expression and then search it. We can see that here, we just click the content of a regular expression to see it, and then include a series of syntax of the regular expression. Of course, this method of writing is not the focus we want to talk about. If you are interested in this, you can open a web page to learn how to use our policy expressions. Here, we will directly click on some online tools of regular expressions. For example, this is not a regular expression. I guarantee that the contents are English and numbers. What should we do? I'm going to copy this string of real expressions here. Then go back to our editor, where we paste such a regular expression. You can notice that now, please enter the name. The content in the name is verified through our customization, and then the verified content is a regular expression. This intelligent expression is a method to represent that it is English and numbers, so here let's take a look. I input a 123 here, and then I input the normal one on the mobile phone here, and then click submit. You can notice that because the smart expression I currently input is English and numbers, it is okay for any type, so here, even if we input an English, click submit to see, and then click English and numbers. If I click submit, it also passes. Here, if I input a Chinese, I click submit, you can see that it will tell me that there is an error, and will select such a piece to the box. Similarly, what if I hope it can only input Chinese characters? I will go here to copy such a string of Chinese characters, return to our form container, and also come from the custom expression. We will paste it in, let's preview it again, and then I will enter a number here, and then I will enter the mobile phone number here, and click a submit. You can see it, and it will tell me the inside story A field, that is, our name field is wrong. He asked me to enter in English because he is still wrong. Then I entered a Chinese, and you can see that he said it correctly. Finally, I'll tell you about the difference between our binding direction. If we want to set the binding direction, we usually use it together with a setting method, so here we copy our button and call it a setting. Usually, we use the event to set our form data, and the action here is changed to our set form data. Then we can see what is in the form data because we need to set the form data. It must correspond to a settlement string, right? For example, its series of field names and the values of some corresponding fields. We will display a result after printing. Here is a form data that returns the result, and then here is the form data above. Let's type it again. Let's click a submit. Is this the string of data we need? So here we copy it. Then here, we use some syntax to change it into a format that we can directly copy. In this way, we can directly copy the contents. We can directly copy these contents. Let's come to our settings. In the settings, we can paste an object like us. So if I use to set the form data now, will its corresponding value be set directly? Let's preview it. Here, we can click a setting to see whether the corresponding values in our form are completely set. Therefore, this is that we dynamically and directly set the values in our form through the setting method, and then click submit after I set it. A series of corresponding values can also be entered. The so-called we go to modify the content of its two-way binding means that if I change it here, for example, I change it here into a police acquisition, you can see that I change it into a police acquisition, and then I can preview it again. In this way, I can see through the same setting. Because I changed the form field such as name to an alarm acquisition, it is not set at present. If it is not set, we call it manual input, that is, it is called a LC, and then click submit. You can see that LC still exists here. Why LC is there? Because we change it here, it is a well to get, so we can get the form data when we submit the event through the form. We can still get the last content in such an input box, but we can no longer set it through the event. Of course, if we are here, and we change the form type here to disabled, what will happen? We can preview it. First, you can see that the name is not set by setting the value. Let me write a value here. And let me click a submit, that is, our acquisition. We can see that we can only obtain his phone and one of his instructions. We can't obtain his name content. Why? Because we have disabled the field of such a form in our side. It means that we can get the information in the form through event, or set the value in the form through event. If you change the access to well, you can only get it. If you change the access to well, you can only get it. If you change the access to well, you can only get it if it is set, it cannot be obtained or set if it is disabled. Therefore, we use the most two-way binding methods. Let us directly bind the value of such a widget and the value of our last form in a two-way way, so we can complete the production of a front-end static form, and then we will look at the effect enterly see. First, we can enter it casually. Click a submit to find that he tells us an error, and the phone field is wrong. Then, in his submitted data, there is only our leasee and his introduction. Then, there is no one of our mobile phones. We need to enter a correct mobile phone in these two, and then here let's introduce ourselves, input a little, and then click submit. You can see that it has passed our verification, and there is no field where we have made an error. Finally, he turned a name, mobile phone and self-introduction we submitted into an object and stored it. Then, this object is convenient for us to directly perform an operation of submitting data to the database. We will explain the operation of submitting data after we learn the database and services. That's all the content of this section. Thank you for watching.